can babies differentiate between mum and dad in the womb?
I mean, we do know from studies that sort of the infant can recognize between different mothers, and they can also recognize between different sort of, from the father's voice from different strangers. So I'm guessing that there is also an ability to sort of differentiate between the mom and dad in the womb, but there's no study that would specifically show that.
Nicola, you were saying something earlier about babies reacting differently to low and high tones. Is there anything around that, even anecdotally?
Well, yeah, I mean, I had read somewhere that the babies, when they're in utero, do like the sound of the male voice because of its very low tone and the low frequencies. So it vibrates through the amniotic fluids equally as beautifully as the mother's voice.
There might be actually a reason for that. Sort of what the womb attenuates is mostly the higher frequencies, and so the male voice is lower, whereas sort of for the mother's voice it's conducted in different fashion to the womb. So it might be sort of a reason for this.
Does it matter in terms of, so let's say you've got a dad who wants to talk to Bump and doesn't quite know how far to position his head. Does it help if his face is like nearer to the bump? Like, does that make a difference at all?
Well, I always sort of warn people from sort of not disturbing the baby too much. I mean, don't shout at the baby. The baby might, I mean, this is sort of lame common sense in that sense, but the issue is that the baby also wants to sleep and it has its own rhythm. Sort of, even if you, like we're discussing now, I mean, that's enough or sort of close enough for the baby to hear.
Did you notice any difference between when you spoke or when your partner spoke?
No, not particularly, but I mean, I did notice, I don't know if it's more that my husband used to speak when they were particularly active, and he would chat, and they used to kick a lot, but I don't know, again, if that's because they were, you know, kicking anyway, and it was more of the active sort of phase, but no, not really, no.
Okay. Yeah, my partner's more likely to talk when he can see her moving.
Exactly.
I don't think he'd purposefully wake. I don't think I'd let him purposefully wake her up by shouting at her. She's awake enough.
She's moving around.
My other half taught my 15-month-old, because he can't talk yet, but that he likes the bump, although he thinks it's his seat, but he blows raspberries on it all the time. I don't know if the baby can hear that or not.
Maybe.
I know, are there any types of sounds that a baby can actually differentiate between in the womb? So, for example, can they differentiate between music or rap or rhyme or anything like that?
I'm sort of, it's a perplexing question, since if we think of how we speak to the babies, it's sort of, it's this parentese style of, it's quite musical in itself. So does the baby sort of differentiate between speech and music? Is it a relevant thing for the baby at all? I'm not sure about that. Sort of, I'm guessing at least we know that they can differentiate between different melodies, and most likely that sort of, if they can differentiate between melodies, most likely different like rap and nursery rhymes, definitely.
The baby is pre-programmed to like lovely intonation patterns and lovely tuneful voices, basically. And so the more tuneful you are when you communicate with your baby, whether it's in your bump or out of your bump, the more attracted they'll be to listen to your voice.
Is that where motherese
Yes,
comes from?
exactly.
Okay.
Babies are made to react and to soothe to parentese. Parentese is a varied intonation pattern and kind of elongated vowel sounds, and we end up with words like doggy and birdie, which some people can't stand, can they? But that actually is more appealing for the babies to listen to.
I know you spoke about volumes of sound and the effect that it can have on a baby. So does a mother have to be careful when it comes to going to concerts or gigs? Can that level of noise affect the bump?
The main issue with the noise is not sort of the noise as such, but it's sort of of course, continuous noise is bad, but then sudden and loud noises usually scare the fetus. And
That's interesting, because my first pregnancy, I really sort of wrapped myself up in cotton wool a lot more. And I remember going to a fireworks display and being really panicked that the noises, because she was jumping, you know, a little bit when the noises went off, and it was so loud. And I was thinking, oh gosh, I hope I haven't, you know, damaged her or frightened her, you know.
I mean, did talking to your bump, so less concerts now and more actual soothing noises. I mean, mums, did you find that it calmed your baby down or it soothed them a little bit while you were still pregnant?
I don't know. I know, particularly with my last baby, I kind of felt more paranoid that something might go wrong. So I used to kind of give her a little prod and have a chat with her, and you know, they do go quite quiet towards the end, so I would have a cold drink of water, a little prod, what's going on, you know, and have a chat, and they do respond, definitely. Yeah.
Come on, baby.
Yeah,
have
come
a
on.
kick.
What's going on in there? You know, just because.
Yeah, well, that's
Yeah.
a great way of establishing that turn-taking in communication. So if your baby gives a little kick, then you push back where the kick came, or if you feel a movement, then you replicate the movement on your bump, and that's a lovely way of establishing that early turn-taking, so the start of a turn-taking conversation. Yeah.
Wow.
Nicola, you've had a lot of experience when it comes to working with infants, how they acquire language. Do you have any practical tips for mums in terms of talking to their bump?
Well, I must say, I didn't find it the most natural thing to do. I thought, gosh, you know, it's a bit strange talking to my bump when they're not even out. But I think as I knew that it was an important part of creating a habit of good communication with your child, I did do it despite, as I say, not feeling quite sure about it.
How did you overcome that first hurdle, though?
Well, I used to listen to the radio as I went to work, and I can remember the same song came on the breakfast show, and I remember listening to that beat and thinking, right, here's my chance to give this baby a bit of a prod and a push, you know, get to feel it. So I would do my sort of feeling exercises then I'd have a little song that I like to sing, you know, push, push, push your bump, or pat, pat, pat your bump, rub, rub, rub your bump, establishing that little song. And then somebody else mentioned about reading to your bump as well.
Yeah.
So that's nice and methodical and very sort of soothing to hear somebody read. My bedtime reading, I'd read a paragraph out loud, and then I'd read I wouldn't, and then I'd start again. And I would do that consciously because I knew that would be a good thing to do with my bump.
So, mums, do you have any tips for... I mean, obviously it was quite easy for you to get your partners involved, but some people may not be quite so lucky. Do you have any tips on how to get your partners involved?
I think maybe to start off with, especially when the baby starts to kick, maybe kind of get them to start feeling it. And when you start to feel the movement and you realise that there's a little person in there, it might start to become kind of more natural, you know.
We played games as well, where when the baby was moving, he'd put his hands on my bump, or still does, and ask questions, and it's this hand's yes, this hand's no. So he tries to, especially things like, should we call you this? Because we haven't got the name sorted yet. And so he was talking to the bump to try and get a reaction.
With their siblings, did you get their siblings involved in talking to the bump?
It's very hard for them to understand, you know, what suddenly there's something in there, you know, and it's still, I think even my daughter's 3, and when her little brother's just come out recently, I don't know if she kind of associates it to being, you know, from, do you know what I mean? It's quite hard to kind of differentiate. So I think it is good to try and make them talk and try and sort of get them to bond with them as early as possible.
It's really important.
My other children didn't really get involved until probably the last 10 weeks, but then that's when the baby can hear the most anyway, isn't it?
That's the beauty of it, is creating those habits, you know, getting everyone involved while the baby's still inside you, that carries over then when the baby's born, so that
I'm sure he'll still play raspberries on her when she's there.
Exactly.
He will.
And why not?
It's a special thing.
And do you have any practical tips for other mums that might be struggling with getting a routine or a practice up in terms of talking to their bump that, you know, worked for you?
I just think, you know, there's nothing to feel kind of embarrassed or self-conscious about. I do understand that it's, you know, it could be quite difficult for people speaking out loud for something that's not physically there yet in your arms, but just keep talking, keep reading, keep singing, and get everybody involved, and I think eventually it would just come really naturally to everybody.
To pick a kind of quiet time to do it. So we were saying earlier, in the bath is always a good one, and you know, you're on your own, there's no one to kind of feel self-conscious about, and it's kind of, you know, you can rub your bump and sort of talk to them and maybe sort of start it off kind of in that respect, really.
Yeah, and definitely if you've got nothing to say, just narrate your day, because that's what we end up doing with the babies anyway. You tell them what you're washing up and what you're cooking for dinner.
You do.
And the baby hears your voice anyway.
Yeah.
Like this baby's hearing my voice right now. I'm not talking to her, but she's
Exactly, yeah.
getting the benefit of hearing me talk anyway.